So welcome. How's your time been going here today?
Great, it's great. I love it. This is I've done maybe 5 shows in my life, but I have to say the 2 I've done here have been really the most enjoyable of all. Not just saying it because of you guys; it actually is the truth. And also you're also knowledgeable. I mean, you know this is why I feel like I'm sure half of you here know more about Peter Parker than I do, but but you can test me anyway. I can try. Uh, but yeah, so it's just a pleasure to meet people who are genuinely interested. You know, they don't just want an autograph to put on the wall, which is very nice, and I'm glad you do, but are also interested in the work itself. So I'm grateful. Thank you very, very much, all of you, for coming. I know you've all got stuff to do on 4th of July week. And you could all be at the beach right now, and instead you're here, and thank you for coming. Also, personally, it's nice because Boston is a town that was where my uncle lived all his life, and he was very dear to me. And whenever I came to visit him, I just always associate Boston with him. Of course, I went to Princeton, so the universities here I hate, but the town itself I really like. So yeah, so it's a joy to be here.
Awesome. Glad to hear. All right. Well, let's just start off with Spider-Man. So, when you first started out as Spider-Man, how did it feel your first time putting on the suit and knowing that responsibility with that character and all the comics out there already? How did it feel taking that as the first live-action depiction?
Yeah. Well, it was a huge responsibility, and also I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I had done a lot of work in theater and a lot of work on television and film, but nothing even remotely like playing a superhero. And in fact, I didn't know why they wanted me for the job, because when I first went in to see them, and they said, you know, we're doing a live action version of Spider-Man, and I thought, well, I know the comic, and I know Superman, and I know Batman, but I thought, gee, I don't know if I'd hire me to play a superhero. But then they made it clear that actually the thing about Peter Parker was that he's just a regular guy. He's not, he doesn't look like he's made out of steel. He doesn't look perfect. He's not perfect. He's got flaws left, right, and center. And we just want him to be a normal guy, a guy that you believe is, going to school, at university, and he's working his way through college by a part-time job as a photographer, and just like thousands and thousands of other people. We want the normalcy of him is what they thought was interesting, that it could be anybody here, anyone who just happens to get bitten by this spider, and then they have this thing thrust upon them that they didn't wish for, they didn't particularly want. In some ways, it's made their life infinitely more complicated and more difficult. And yet, how do you deal with that, And ultimately, of course, the motto of "with great power comes great responsibility," and that's something Peter has to learn. That he could use that power to rob banks. He could use it to do all kinds of corrupt things to make himself lots of money. The fact that he makes the choice to use it to try to do some good for people. I think that resonated for me, and it certainly did for the people at the network. So yeah, I absolutely felt the responsibility putting on the suit the first time. I also felt very weird putting the suit on for the first time. It's just not something you normally do, is like put this full body suit and a mask on and walk out onto 56th Street in New York, in front of everybody who's just walking down the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So I had to get over all of that. I had to just say, look, this is it. This is the role. You took the job. It's your job to do it. So, and I just grew to love it. I grew to love the character. I love going to work every day and doing it. I love both. I love playing Peter, who I thought was kind of a really interesting guy, and kind of bittersweet. He would fall in love with girls, and they didn't like him because they thought he was a nerd, because they had no idea he really was Spider-Man, all that stuff. I found all that fascinating. So I really grew to love the show, and I love doing the show. And I think every actor you know, you've got a bucket list of stuff you want to do, and whether they admit it or not, I think almost every actor starring in your own primetime series is something every actor wants to have a shot at doing, at least once. And I had that opportunity. So, you know, I just was able to check that one off. And yeah. Also, just on a personal level, you know, you're talking about responsibility of playing the character. But there's also a fundamental responsibility. When you're doing a series, you know, there are 200 people working on the show, and their weekly paycheck depends on you delivering the goods and the show continuing. So, you know, I was 27, and to go to work every morning and you arrive and there's this huge army of people, you know, everybody here is here because I'm playing this role, and if I screw it up, you know, we're all out of work. And that's, I think you grow up quickly when you have a responsibility like that on your shoulders. So in a way, there was this weird sort of parallel thing of what was going on for Nicholas and what was going on for Peter Parker at the same time. So yeah, it was a lot of responsibility.
So you said it was weird to put on the suit for the first time. So how long did it take for you to adjust to being in that kind of role as you're filming? Was it like a week went by and you were like, now I'm in it. Now the suit doesn't feel as weird anymore. Like, when did it finally wear off? Or did it stay weird the entire time?
No. It definitely wore off. I might say, just from a sheer physical point of view, the suit was a work in progress for a while. And the first couple suits they did were incredibly uncomfortable, very, very hot. You couldn't see out of the eyepieces. Well, they were like sunglasses is what they were, which was great when you were trying it on back in the air-conditioned studio. Yes. Then we'd get out on the street and it would be, you know, 95 degrees, and they'd say, okay, just run as fast as you can, you know, these 3 blocks, you're chasing the bad guys. Well, you go half a block and these have steamed up. And you're just like running, and I think I have no idea what I'm doing, or, you know, I could slam into a wall any second. So then they put the little perforations in them, and they tried all kinds of things. Eventually the suit became more comfortable, and I became more comfortable. I'd say maybe 2 weeks.
2 weeks to it.
Yeah.
So did you have any mishaps, though, that happened in that time? Like you said, it would fog up. Did anything ever happen, or did you make it smoothly the entire time?
No, we were lucky. But also, I mean, that's the whole point of having the stuntman, you know. There's a great little scene, I don't know if you've seen the movie, but at the very beginning of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where Leonardo DiCaprio is explaining to a reporter what the job of a stuntman is. And as he says, you know, sure, I could probably fall off a horse if I wanted to, but if I fall off the horse and break my leg, then the whole show shuts down. Whereas if the stuntman falls off the horse, we don't shut the show down. Well, that was kind of the same with us. You know, there was some of the, I mean, I did a fair bit of the stuff as Spider-Man, especially if I had both feet flat on the ground. But once we started going up in the air, they just said, no, you're not doing that, you know, for that very reason. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
So since the character of Peter Parker is such a relatable human being and carries such flaws and is just kind of a normal, everyday person, how did it feel to get into character? Was it easier, or was it, like, you know, just because he was such a normal person with regular life things going on, or was it still a difficult character to kind of get into? Like, how did that feel?
I would say he was, I wouldn't say he was difficult, but I would say it was really just like any other role. You know, you make it, you try to make it truthful and you try to make it real, but you don't want to play yourself. You create another person, and so I just approached it like I was playing any other part. I just tried to forget about the whole kind of superhero side to it, and just play the story, play the character, play the lines as though you were just, you know, you just being as honest as you could possibly be. I mean, that's kind of the way I work. I just think any character you do, you just try to make him as truthful as you possibly can.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
I think it's the only way the audience is going to feel, you know, if a scene's supposed to be sad, I think the only way they're going to feel sad, or if it's happy, or if it's, you know, loving or whatever, I think the only way that emotion is going to be felt by the audience is if there's a truthfulness in what you do. Yeah.
How much research did you do beforehand, before playing it?
I had never read a Spider-Man comic in my life. So I quickly went out. I never thought I was going to get the job. And then when I got the job, I went straight out and bought about 10 of them and just went right through them. Oh, I see. He's got an Aunt May and he's got this and he's got a boss named Jonah Jameson. So I had it all figured out. So I could go in and pretend I was an authority on day one. But I to this day, most of you in this room probably know more about Spider-Man than I do. But I did what I felt was my job, you know.
Yeah.
I learned the premise of the character.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. So, were there any most memorable moments while filming it?
That show. Yeah. We did one in Hong Kong. It was called the Dragon's Challenge, I think.
Chinese web.
What's that?
Chinese web.
That's right. I told you. That to me was, well, okay, some of you probably know, but around the world outside of the United States, these things were released as feature films. They weren't released as a TV series. So what they would do is they would take either two of them and put them together and release it, or we would do an extended version of an episode, like 90 minutes long. And that was one was in New York, one was in Hollywood, and one was in Hong Kong. And the Hong Kong one really felt like you were in a real movie, like you were in a big movie. I mean, we had a lot of Asian actors in it. Rosalind Chow, who played kind of my love interest in it, who to this day is a close friend of mine, you know, beautiful, beautiful young Asian American girl who, 18 years old, it was her very first job. And, you know, and she was very excited. And the man who played her husband was a very, very well-established Chinese-American actor. And just filming in Hong Kong, you know, and working in these extraordinary locations, it was thrilling. It was very exciting, you know, and dealing with all the kind of local culture and everything. And to show you how primitive it was, I mean, I don't know how many of you have heard of them, but these days there's these things called steady camps where, you know, they're incredibly well, a cameraman can like walk following an actor down a street and it is absolutely as smooth, you know, they don't have to lay track down anymore. It's these cameras that have gyroscopes, you know, in them and they work. Well, you know what we had? We had a cardboard box that a guy put on his shoulder with a hole in it, and the camera was inside the cardboard box. And he followed me down the street because we couldn't afford to get all the regular people off the street and hire a bunch of extras. So we just used the real people. And I just walked through the crowd of Hong Kong. And they had no idea that there was a camera following me because they thought it was just some guy with a box on his shoulder. So, you know, it was very old school that way, you know. And speaking of that, all credit to Fred Waugh, who was the stuntman, because these days with CGI, you know, you see somebody go up a building and you think, yeah, fine, you know, that's a computer, you punch a few buttons. No. Freddie went up the wall. He went up the building. Or if he did a swing from one rooftop to another rooftop, he did the swing from one rooftop to another rooftop. I mean, they are all real stunts that he's doing. And, you know, he was amazing, you know, and a huge amount of the success of the show goes to him, you know, and he was a great guy. He was an ex-Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus trapeze artist. So he had absolutely no fear of heights at all. And I mean, you talk about memorable moments. The day we were in the Empire State Building, and I'm in the office and shot a scene in the office, and then they open the window on the 69th floor, and Freddie just goes out the window. And I just thought, no, that's just not humanly possible. No sane person would do that. I mean, he had a harness, you know, but you think, okay, there's this like piano wire cable holding him in the harness. But fortunately, we never had an accident on that show, which was a miracle. But I'm thrilled we never did. All credit to them. Yeah.
Awesome. Cheers to that.
All right. So, were there any skills? I know you had everything that was off ground you didn't do yourself, but was there anything that you had to learn while you were like firmly planted on the ground, 2 feet
Oh yeah,
on
well,
that?
I did some of the fights.
Yeah.
I did some of the fights on the ground, and so of course you work with the, you work with the fight master, and you choreograph it like a dance.
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
I mean that's what funny enough, I did a film in Bangkok just last year that was a martial arts film. I was not the martial artist, but I played a CIA guy, but there were a lot of martial artists in it, and watching those martial arts, Muay Thai was the actual school of fighting. And I got fascinated watching them because they, the detail of the way they would plan these shots, of your kick is going to go to that shoulder, and then you're going to do a spin, and then your other leg is going to go here. And it's all completely charted out so brilliantly. And then when they shoot it, it's kind of a miracle to watch it all come together. So I did learn some of those, the basic ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, 2 things. Who's your favorite villain from the show that you were on? And then who is just your favorite Spider-Man villain in general, from wider comics or movies or anything like that?
I would say from our show, actually in the pilot, we had a wonderful actor named Thayer David, and he played the villain in that, who he managed to kind of, through mind control everybody, just because he was so evil. His performance was wonderful. And then I think the guy Raul Julia played in the Spider-Man movies. I'd done a movie with Raul, and it was great to see him in that role. So I can't remember the character's name of that he played, but he was terrific. But if anybody also wants to ask, well, once we get to questions, we can get off of Spider-Man eventually.
Yeah.
But for now, and we can ask more questions about Spider-Man. Whatever you want to do.
So, once upon a time in Hollywood, then. How was it working with Quentin Tarantino?
I think every actor, if they've been very good in their life and they go to heaven, they get to work with Quentin Tarantino. It is just a joy. And every actor on the film felt that way. I mean, I had a lot to do with Leo and also Timothy Oliphant. And Tim and I would sit there on the set and we would look at each other and say, I don't want to go home. I just never want to go home. I just want to stay here for the rest of my life, right here on this set, doing this. Because it's kind of everything you dream of. When you're a kid and you're lying awake at night and you're thinking, someday I want to be an actor, this is what it's like. This is working for him. He just makes the whole thing joyous all day long. You work hard, but the work is... there's fun attached to it all the way. And I think he's brilliant. And I was meant to be there right now doing the next one of his. But he, for reasons none of us quite know, he's decided to put it on ice for a while. But I was going to come back and play Sam Wanamaker again, which I still very, very much hope they still do. He was bringing 2 characters back from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He was bringing the stuntman back that Brad Pitt played, and he was bringing Sam Wanamaker back. Because basically it's Hollywood about 5 years later. So it's Hollywood 1975 as opposed to Hollywood's 1969. But beyond that, I know nothing, because with Quentin, you know nothing. I mean, the nuclear secrets are easier to find out than what the script is about. I didn't know how Once Upon a Time in Hollywood ended until I went to the premiere. No one had talked, we weren't allowed to see the script. So if you weren't in that scene at the end, you didn't know how it ended, and no one was allowed to tell you. So, I mean, people have been fired off his movies in the past for telling people what goes on in the movie. So I got the pages of the scenes I was in. That was it. So people like Margot, I met Margot at the rap party at the end of the film, and I met a lot of the actors. I hadn't seen them until because we weren't really invited to mix with each other, to share information about what was going on. So he's eccentric in that way, but I understand it. The other thing he does, and I strongly recommend this in every school in the world, no cell phones. From the minute you arrive in the morning, your cell phone is put into a locked box, and you don't get it back until the end of the day. And no cell phones, no iPads, no electronic devices. And the extraordinary thing is what that does is it focuses every single person in that room on what's actually going on in the scene. Because they're not over there in the corner sending texts and reading things and scrolling. They're watching the work. And that creates an energy that is just unlike any film I've been on in, well, since before cell phones. I think Sound of Music was one of the last films I can remember doing where absolutely everybody in the room would sit there and watch every single scene. So it's like you're doing theater in front of 85, 90 people. And believe me, that creates a whole different energy on the set, and I think a better one. So for all those reasons, working with Quentin is a dream come true. Yeah.
Wow, it's awesome to hear. Just the whole no cell phone, especially in a day and age where it's
Exactly.
so pervasive everywhere and such focus. So that's very cool detail that I didn't even know. So, what are some other favorite roles besides working on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Spider-Man, Sound of Music? Other than those big three, what are some other favorite roles in your career?
Well, in film. Or television, I guess. I'm just trying. Well, I did a Ray Bradbury science fiction miniseries called The Martian Chronicles with Rock Hudson and Gail Honeycutt, and it's such a brilliant story that Ray Bradbury wrote that it was just a joy to do it, and I had the pleasure of playing the central character in this particular storyline of a guy who goes back to Mars and thinks he's gone back to his own childhood. And it was so beautifully written that I think it was one of the most rewarding things I've done. And it's stood the test of time. It's still a very, very good show, I think. Also, weirdly enough, I think probably my very first job, which was Lord of the Flies when I was 10, only because it introduced me to this world. And it just made me realize it is possible to do something as extraordinary as this. And we had a wonderful director, Peter Brook, and he just made you feel like it's fun. It's fun to do a movie. And I still think that. And it's why I've kept doing it my whole life. I mean, this is my 64th year as an actor, and it's never crossed my mind to do anything else, ever. I mowed lawns when I was 12, but that was only with my brother because he needed somebody to help him. But as a real job, I've never done anything but this, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody else. It's a tough job. It can break your heart, but for me, there's never been an alternative. There's never been anything that's given me the satisfaction or the camaraderie of the people that I've worked with over the years. That I think is the thing I feel most fortunate about. Is I've worked with such extraordinarily talented and kind and good and nice people. And I find most actors, good actors, are really also just good people. At least that's been my experience. So yeah. So I would say that really, Lord of the Flies started it.
What are the most challenging characters to play to you? Like, what are the traits in a role that you find are the most challenging aspects?
It's not all that hard to play somebody who's a bad guy, except it's challenging to play a bad guy who doesn't know he's bad. And I don't think Adolf Hitler woke up in the morning and said, I'm the most terrible human being on the face of the earth. I think he thought he was a good person. We know he was a monster. We know he was one of the worst people in the history of the human race. But he didn't think that. And that is always the challenge for me. That is a big challenge when you're playing somebody who is completely evil. I just played a corrupt televangelist who steals everybody's money and spends it on cocaine and prostitutes. Otherwise, a nice guy. But so to find a way to play somebody who just has like no redeeming value whatsoever, but he's like a phony, everything about it. And yet to somehow find a way in your own brain that you're not going to play this guy like a cartoon. You're going to play him like a real person who genuinely believes, yes, okay. I mean, some of us remember Jim and Tammy Baker. I don't think they thought they were terrible people. They probably thought, well, we're building this beautiful place because it'll inspire everybody or whatever. I don't know what they told themselves. But so having to create that is difficult, I find. It's quite easy to play a nice person. But to play a genuinely, a person with virtually no redeeming qualities and still make them interesting, because otherwise they're boring.
Yeah.
I mean, they are. If they're horrible from the first time you see them until the end of the movie, there's been no journey there at all. So, yeah, I would say that's it. Yeah.
So does playing that type of character affect you mentally at all when you get into the character? Does it ever put you in sort of a funk,
That's the trick, I think, is to be able to leave it at work. It can be difficult. It depends. If you're having to go somewhere really dark, into territory that is very, very difficult. Like the guy who played Dexter on television, I admire him because he had to go into serial killer territory or serial rapist territory or whatever. I just think takes you into such a terrible dark space that to find a way to play that and then at the end of the day get in your car and go home, that takes work. My wife is an actress and she has this expression, and I think she's right. She works in the theater mainly, and she plays a lot of tragic roles. And she said, your body doesn't know the difference between you acting that you're going through a trauma and really going through a trauma because you're using exactly the same, the same kind of stuff is coming up within you. So to do that 8 times a week on stage and have it not take a toll on you is very difficult. And it's the same. I mean, for good actors in film, you have to dig within yourself. You just have to. You can't stay on the surface. It won't work. So that's part of the discipline of it, though. It's a skill. It's a skill you learn like any other, And but that's kind of one of the things people go to acting school for, is to learn some of those basic skills. I never went to acting school. I was just always working, but I picked it up along the way. Yeah.
Very cool.
All right, and this will probably be just the last question.
Yeah,
before we
because I'm
open
sorry
up
I
the
kept you guys
Q&A
too
because
long.
we have
Yeah.
So just the inverse. What is the most joyous of a role for you to play, and what would be like the highest aspects of a character role that you want to take, and you're like, I'm really looking forward to playing this kind of character?
Oh, I think playing somebody where you bring joy. I mean, look, having been in The Sound of Music will always be something that I will cherish because of the joy I know, I've been told over and over again, it's brought to so many other people. And to have the gift of playing something that, for 60 years has brought so much happiness to so many people and has affected them profoundly, in many ways, it is astonishing. I mean, those of us who were in the film, we all thought at the end of that film, goodbye, that was lovely, I loved meeting you, maybe I'll see you again someday. We didn't know we were going to be bonded by that with a bond that would never break. And to this day. And that's very unique. And so to have had the chance to do something that has brought so much happiness to so many people is a gift that I, am so grateful I've had. So I would say that's it more than anything.
Awesome.
So I'm just an incredibly lucky person, I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and
Now we'd like to open it up to you
Oh, yeah,
guys. We have like 10 to 15
Forgot
minutes.
there was a question.
yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
We have like 15 minutes left
Yeah.
for questions.
Please.
Hi there, Nicholas. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Is there any truth to the rumor that there's maybe going to be a Spider-Man spin-off movie from the Hulk series with Bill Bixby?
Well, there is truth to the fact that Bill and I had a few beers one night, and Bill and I said, "Wouldn't it be great if Dr. Banner and Peter, contacted each other, because he's a doctor, you're a science student, and they've got to solve some problem, and in order to solve it, they need both Spider-Man and the Hulk to solve it." We both thought, genius idea. We went to CBS with it, and they went, But they said, no, next season, let's look into that. We'll do a crossover. Well, we never had. Bill died, and we didn't have another season. So and I couldn't do it with Linda in Wonder Woman because she was with a different label. So unfortunately, best laid plans never happened. But yes, there was truth to that. There was certainly truth in that bar that night. Anybody else?
Question all the way back there.
Yeah.
Is this a bad time to ask for an autograph?
Well, it's not a bad time, but why don't you wait till we just finish? As soon as we're done, I'll meet you in the hallway. Okay? No, please.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Nicholas. Were you friends with Bill Bixby?
Well, we knew each other. We weren't big. I was a big fan of his. I mean, I'd seen his work before he did this, and I thought he was a very fine actor. Yeah.
Great guy. I've always wanted to meet him.
It was a tragedy that he
I
died
know,
so
I
young.
know.
He was such a good actor.
And I'm the biggest Incredible Hulk and Spider-Man a memorabilia collector.
Oh,
For
great.
40 plus years.
Yeah.
And this is my happiness meeting you.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very
Thank you.
kind. Thank you very much for
Thank
being
you.
here. Yes.
What got you first interested in acting? Was it in grammar school or play or something that you saw?
Well, it was kind of a few things. For one thing, my mother had been an actress back in England, and she never pushed me to do it, but I had heard stories that she told about the plays she'd been in and the movies she'd been in, and as a little boy, it sounded really fun. And I did do some plays when I was at school, when I was in elementary school. Simple stuff, the Thanksgiving pageant, and stuff like that. But I liked it. I quite liked getting up on a stage and doing stuff. And it just happened that there was an article in the paper that they were advertising to audition boys for this movie called Lord of the Flies, and they wanted boys about my age. And I asked my parents if I could go and audition, and they said, sure, if you want to. And so I was incredibly lucky that I got chosen to be in it. And then the director of that film, he recommended me to a producer in New York who needed a boy in the play she was doing that year on Broadway. So I kind of went from one to the next, and then I signed with the William Morris Agency, and then I've just done it ever since. Yeah. So, and I went to professional children's school in New York, so I kept working through those years. Yeah. So I think I somehow just always thought, it doesn't really even sound like work. It just sounds like something fun, and I think I still do, in a way. I think that. Yeah. Yes.
So you came all the way from Australia
Yeah.
to be here. A lot of us have never been to Australia. What's the top 3 things people should go to if they go?
If they want to go to Australia, well, I would say the Great Barrier Reef, which is an astonishing natural wonder. I would say the Sydney Opera House, which is an astonishing man-made architectural wonder, and the beaches, certainly the beaches, which are absolutely exquisitely beautiful. So, for me, I would say that's it. Yeah. Hello.
Will you share a little bit about your experience on Brady Bunch?
My experience on the Brady Bunch. Yes. I only did one episode of the Brady Bunch, and I was a bit intimidated because when I went on to do it, it was such a huge show and hugely popular, and they were already super famous, all of them. And they said you're playing Marsha Brady's date, stroke boyfriend. Well, not really boyfriend, but date. And I again, I thought, gee, this is, and then also felt incredibly self-conscious because I think I was 20 at the time and I thought, I'm going to be the world's oldest high school student. But this was before John Travolta did Grease, so I really didn't have anything to worry about. Look, we shot it like every other TV episode you do, and we didn't know that subject was noses and breaking Marsha's nose and all that was going to turn out to be such a thing, And I would just like to say a word in defense of Doug Simpson. Let's not forget, Marsha's the one who dumped the other boy to go on a date with me. So this is called, as ye sow, so shall ye reap. And I really think the morality of the tale is such that it was Marsha who learned the lesson. Yes, it's true, I went back at the end and tried to make good with her and ask her out when the nose went back down again. I'm not saying Doug was a great guy, but let's just know how all of this started, and everybody forgets that. Everybody says, what a creep, you dumped her when she broke her nose. And said, just think back a little. So anyway, but yeah, and that episode has gone on to achieve some kind of amazing cult following.
Teenagers.
Yes.
How was it like working on the new Mission Impossible TV series?
Oh, the new one with Peter Graves. Oh, it was great. It was great. I loved it because, of course, I was a kid when I watched the first one. And I was dying to, and so when I got asked to do, and then, of course, they shot that in Australia. So that was one of the reasons I was able to, I happened to be out there doing a mini-series about the America's Cup boat race. And I played Dennis Conner, the skipper of the American boat. And they just called up and said, we're doing Mission Impossible. Do you want to come and be on it? I thought, yes. How cool is that?
I still have that episode on videotape.
Do you really? Oh my
It
gosh.
was the late 80s when it came out.
Yeah. That's right. That's when it was. Yes.
So going back to Spider-Man, obviously Charles Freeze Productions was in charge of the company, in charge of the show.
Yeah.
And Charles Freeze was famous for doing a lot of TV movies.
Mhm.
That's sort of what he was known for.
Mhm.
But there's another name that's in the production of the show, and it's Dan Goodman.
Yes.
And there's almost nothing known about Dan Goodman. There's nothing on the internet. He never did another TV show of any kind or movie.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember Dan very well.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, he was a businessman
Okay.
who happened to invest in this show.
Interesting.
So of course he gets a producer credit because if you write a check, you get a producer credit.
Yeah.
And but I don't think he really was a TV guy. He was around a bit,
Yeah.
but no, it was a Charles Freeze production.
Yeah.
He was a big mogul in Hollywood television at that time.
Sure.
Yeah. Yes.
Similar to the Brady Bunch thing, you also played a character, I think his name's Harold, in the two-parter 8 is Enough episode.
Yes.
With Eddie Buckley and Judy Strangers.
That's right.
And you wound up going off with Judy Strangers.
Yes.
First of all, you're a lucky man.
I've been lucky in so many shows.
But I was just wondering if you have any memories of shooting that. 'Cause,
Yeah. Yeah, I do, of course. Of shooting 8 is Enough.
Yeah.
Of course I do. And Dick Van Patten was in it, and all these people who I really admired. And again, it was another show that already was established, and it was kind of like a cultural icon. And it's very hard to be a guest star and walk onto a show where everybody knows each other really well. They've been working together for years. And I've always felt there should be an Emmy for Best Guest Star because I'm quite serious, because unless you are part of the business, you don't know how hard it is. If you've got like one thing, if you're the bad guy on Law and Order, and you've got to go in and be grilled by all the series regulars, and they've known each other for years, and like they can do it, in their sleep. And you've got to come in and you've got to hit it and match them and match their level on day one, in the very first shot. And that's not easy. I'm here to tell you. I've done it many, many times, and it's one of the hardest things to do in show business. The Waltons was another one, where to come in and do the Waltons, and Richard Thomas and I were both in love with the same girl, who was Sissy Spacek, and again, you have to come straight in And it's like my first scenes with John Boy, and boy, you've got to be right in there, and you've got to be right up at his level. And so, yeah, that's a whole kind of craft of its own, is guest starring.
Mil Guerrero's in also in that.
Yeah. That's right, yes, yes. Hello, yes. Yes.
What are some of the challenges that you find playing a hero versus playing a villain? Which one do you have more fun?
I think playing a hero is almost harder. Playing a villain, for the reasons I said before, once you've kind of got a handle on it. I mean, the fact of the matter is whether it's in a play or whether it's on TV or a movie, the good guy is very often the most boring character. And because he's a good guy, you know. So it is very challenging to be playing somebody who is the hero, but also make them fascinating. I mean, this is, you look at the work of somebody like George Clooney and you think, well, that's how good an actor he is, because he so often plays Mr. Nice Guy, and yet he can still make them funny, he can make them ironic, he can make them, you know, charming, he can just add colors to them that are not on the page. He's just bringing that himself. So I would say it's much more challenging playing the good guy for me. Yeah.
When's the last time you talked to Heather Menzies? I saw her about 20 years ago.
Well, she passed away.
Yeah, I know that.
Oh, well, I spoke to her, well, it's very personal, but I actually spoke to her in the hospital 2 days before she passed away. Sorry, there's a man behind you, yes.
What have you kept anything from the Sound of Music experience?
You mean any physical items?
Do you have any memorabilia or anything?
Oh yeah, I've got a lot. I mean, funnily enough, I was just going through my stuff at my mother's house. My mother kept it all. I didn't, but she kept it all. And there's this amazing scrapbook she kept, and it's got like every single thing, you know, and like a piece of the curtain fabric from the curtain clothes, and all kinds of cool stuff like that. You know, so yeah, I do. I have and I've got my script, you know, with all my 13-year-old handwriting in it of all my notes I made to myself, and I've got, you know, tons of photographs of all of us kids together, you know, and home movies. I was given an 8mm camera for my 14th birthday by my mother in Salzburg. So I have a huge reel, like an hour and a half, of behind-the-scenes home movies of us, some of which are on the DVD of the family scrapbook, but I've got lots more. So yeah, I have a fair bit off of Sound of Music. And I had my lederhosen, but I let my niece wear them, and she sold them on eBay. Yeah. She wanted to wear them to a costume party, and the next thing, and I said, where are the lederhosen? Oh, I sold them. Yeah.
So what are the plans for the 60th anniversary?
Okay, well, we're going to Salzburg. Well, there are lots of plans. I mean, there's stuff being done here. I think we're doing something in New York. I think we're doing something in LA. But that'll just be like groups, not everybody, but everybody is going to Salzburg because they are opening a Sound of Music museum. And it's going to be terrific. I must say, I've seen all the plans. It's not just like a gift shop. It's like a proper museum, you know, with, you know, interactive stuff and videos and all that stuff. And we're all going to be there to launch the museum and to do stuff for the opening of, I'm actually going in 10 days just to do some little promo shots in the city to kind of promote it for the city of Salzburg. And then, but all of us, you know, kids from the film, I'm not sure if Julie will come, but if she does, I hope she does.
And where do we start following that so we can get our hotel reservations?
Well, that's a good question. And in fact, I'm supposed to speak to Astrid. I will find out and I'll let them know because, yeah, I think they're just on the verge of kind of announcing all that. And then I'm sure they will have a website and they'll have all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah, come over for it when we're there. Yeah.
So another Spider-Man question. There was a huge difference between season 1 of the show and season 2, where they dropped Michael Pataki was dropped, Ellen Bry was brought in.
Yeah.
You had the music had completely changed from Stu Phillips' score to Danica Caprock. Was there a lot of conversation about that? Obviously, I heard the ratings were pretty good on season 1, so why the big overhaul?
Look,
Yeah.
there are endless decisions that were made on that show that
Yeah.
make absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah.
And I've been asked over and over again that question, and I just always have to say I have no idea.
Okay.
We started out with the highest rated show on CBS that year, a 37 share for the pilot, which broke every record. And they just kept moving us around, and then we'd be off the air for 3 weeks, and then we'd be on a different night. And I said, you can't do this. I mean, back in those days, as I'm sure many of us remember, TV was a ritual. On Tuesday nights you had the Waltons. On Sunday nights you had Bonanza. You knew when your show was going to be on. You couldn't just do a show where, you put it on Monday night 1 week, then you don't have it on for 3 weeks, and then suddenly it's on a Thursday night at a different time slot, and expect the audience to follow it. And then the network guys would come to me and say, why are we going down to the ratings? What are you guys doing wrong? And I'm going, we're just doing the same show, So, I know. I mean, I'm not sorry Ellen came on, but I mean, I loved Lisa Albacher, who was the original girl, and she was terrific. And I thought we kind of had it right at the beginning.
Yeah.
I don't know why Michael didn't come back. I think that might have been his choice. I'm just not sure.
Right.
Yeah. Although I loved him, I thought he was a great.
I can't imagine what it was like to act with him. I mean,
He was one of the funniest men I've ever met.
yeah.
Anyway, thank you all very much. I'm sure I've kept you way too long, but thank you for your questions.